I started before I got out of school, actually, in 1967. Fortunately, the personnel department didn't ask me if I had a degree, because I'm sure they probably wanted one. They assumed I was out of school. I wasn't. I was going to work there for the summer. I realized after about 2 weeks on the job I was learning so much more than I had learned in school. My design studies in school were just what I needed, because I think I had pretty good hand skills, but I needed philosophy and theory. When I went to work that summer full-time as a designer, I knew nothing about making art camera ready or reproduction or anything like that. I learned it on the job. I made myself into a designer / illustrator, because I realized that as much as I like design, everything about painting that I had learned and the drawing I'd been doing personally since I was 3 years old probably was setting me up more for illustration. Although, when I was a graphic designer and an art director, I had never seen an illustrator's annual, the big book then, the book back in those days, until I was working in the field as an art director for a couple of years. And a supply salesman brought me an illustrator's annual, and I looked at it and I thought, wow, there's a big fat book full of nothing but the kind of stuff that I would love to do someday. So I started doing more and more illustration to use in my own design work, and then eventually in the design studio I was working, I was able to make the transition gradually into all illustration all the time. And then we built we built an illustration group within the design firm. That's when I hired Greg Manchess and a number of other award-winning illustrators. Actually, out here in the Midwest, we had probably 10, and I'd say out of those 10, probably 8 of them were in the annuals. I went to work for a designer here in town that had started a small studio to serve the region. Graphic design, not illustration. When I joined him, I'd already been doing some freelance spot illustration for him. And when I joined him, I was the 7th person in the group. And I was there for 15 years. And by the time I left in the mid-80s, 86, we had probably 40 people. It was Hellman Associates, the name of the founder, Robert Hellman. And illustration-wise, well, we did design for regional clients, and then we reached out and pretty much to a national level. Illustration-wise, we worked worldwide. We had a full animation house. It was, animation as it was in the 80s. It was cell, animated, painted cells and all that. We had the animation stand, camera, all that. We had a graphic design staff, and at that point, illustration was really driving the product. We had probably 10 illustrators on staff at one time. We bought an old church, an Episcopalian church, I think it was, with a beautiful nave, and converted it into 2 levels of workspaces, and like I said, got ourselves up to maybe 8, 10, 11 illustrators. Most of the illustrators were good enough to be in the national annuals, be chosen for the big show. And we learned a lot from each other. It was my chance to go outside and hire people to join me as an illustrator. I was in charge of this group, sort of. And I could hire guys like Greg Manchess and bring him in as a fresh out of school in Minneapolis, and a couple other guys I hired from Art Center in LA, places like that. So we all got to be good friends. We had a wonderful working camaraderie, a working relationship. I mean, we socialized together. We worked really hard, and we played pretty hard too. But it was really fun, and it was very symbiotic. So that was a big, I think, factor in my development. It was being, I was in charge, and I was probably as motivated or more so than anybody else in the group to make myself better personally. But I was also learning from these guys that had the advantages I didn't have. I never studied illustration. I studied painting and design. And these guys came from, a powerhouse program like Art Center in LA in the 80s, the late 70s, early 80s. And I was able to learn from them too at the same time. The first year was the first time I did the Wild Kingdom calendar. It was 12 or 13 images, all in pastel, of wildlife of North America. And the good thing about that was that it helped me grow up fast in that medium, because I did an entire calendar of pastels of polar bears and raccoons and pronghorn antelope and all these wonderful wildlife images. And I just did very simple, interestingly composed images of an animal in its environment, and had a great time with that. Strangely enough, another kind of important year, I guess you could call it, in my development and a few of the other illustrators with me at the studio was the Bicentennial, 1976. And everybody was doing bicentennial stuff, that promotional stuff that year. I did 2 or 3 calendars revolving around the bicentennial, and I love history, I love research, and it was a natural to depict these events from the revolutionary times. So there was a lot of illustration to be done back in those days for an incredible variety of accounts. And but I wasn't at the point then where I was regularly getting the big magazine assignments that I craved. I put myself into position to do that, probably in the late 80s, and the late 70s. Around 1980, I started to break through as a recognizable artist on the entire scene. I always stress this to students. A lot of those were pro bono jobs that I did because I knew they had potential. They'd be good portfolio pieces. They'd be show entries, and they were theater posters, the first ones. I did the University of Northern Iowa lyric theater poster. I went out and promoted myself to do that assignment for free with the director of the theater department here at the university. And I said, I'll do it, but you have to give me creative freedom, number 1, and you have to find the budget to print a full-color poster, number 2. And he did both those things, and I did the poster, and I won a gold medal at the Society of Illustrators with it in New York, which was beyond my wildest dreams at that time. And then, kind of as icing on the cake, they printed the image on the cover of the annual book. So all of a sudden, here I was, coming sort of out of nowhere, out of the world of advertising illustration or institutional illustration into the Society of Illustrators consciousness. And I was very excited about that. I'd been in the annuals for a few years, but I never dreamed I could win a medal. 27 now. I may have topped out. I don't know. I may. I don't know if I have. I don't know if there are any more in my future or not. But I don't really worry about that.